of Delaware, the president's home state. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Great to be on with you, Brett. Thank you.
You heard in Lucas's piece this week, a man called police on himself, saying he wanted to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He did that outside Kavanaugh's home, armed and prepared to do it. You co-sponsored this bill last month to beef up security for Supreme Court justices and their family, but the House has not moved on that bill for 30 days. You heard House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Lucas's piece reference there's no problem here. There's protection for the justices. Nobody's going to get harmed over the weekend. But what about that, and what is the holdup?
Well, Brett, I was grateful for the chance to work with Senator Cornyn. We got that bill unanimously through the United States Senate. And as you know, these days, not enough things get through the Senate with the kind of uniform, universal support that that bill enjoyed. The House is working to add a provision that would allow the Marshal of the Supreme Court to decide to extend protection to the staff and families of staff of the Supreme Court. I think that's appropriate. That's an acceptable compromise. More than anything, I think the House needs to take it up and pass it early next week, and I'm optimistic after several conversations with House leadership that they will. Frankly, as you also referenced in the introduction, Brett, the January 6th hearing that just took place was a riveting reminder of the dangers of politically motivated violence in our country, and the gun massacres, the shootings that happened at a grocery store in Buffalo and at an elementary school in Uvalde are also a call to action. And I'm grateful to be working with Senator Cornyn as a part of a broad bipartisan group that's working to address mental health and gun safety as well.
I'm going to get to both of those other things in just a minute, but staying on this particular thing, there is already a federal statute on the books that makes it illegal to protest in front of a judge's home. It is Title 18, Section 1507. These groups publish the conservative justices' addresses online. They've been protesting nightly. Should they be arrested?
Look, Brett, we have to strike the right balance here between protecting freedom of speech in this country and ensuring that our justices and judges are safe. We passed a bill through the Senate months and months ago that would also provide further protections obscuring the addresses, for example, of justices and judges. That's something we took up in the wake of a horrifying attack on the family of a federal court judge in New Jersey where her son was killed. I do think we need to take stronger action to make sure that our federal judiciary is safe, because that's part of making sure our democracy is safe, which really is the core issue of the January 6th hearings, is how do we make sure that the fundamentals of our democracy, the safety and security of Congress, the peaceful transfer of power, and I would also add the safety and security of our federal judiciary is ensured. We should act.
Senator, we're getting ready for this ruling, and it's going to be controversial no matter what happens, if it matches the leaked draft opinion or not. There is this law on the books. I'm just asking, should they follow the law? Should the Attorney General say, yes, arrest those people before something happens?
Well, Brett, I think if the leaked version of the opinion is matched by what would be a remarkable act of judicial activism, conservative judicial activism, there will be understandable anger across the nation. As an elected official, I've certainly had protests out front of my house. Many of us have who serve in Congress or in other elected offices. But we need to make sure that all appropriate actions are being taken to ensure the safety of members of our federal judiciary, including Supreme Court justice.
Okay, so don't arrest the protesters based on that title. I got it. That's what you're saying. The president said this.
Brad, let's be clear. I didn't say don't arrest protesters. I'm simply saying that all appropriate action should be taken to ensure the safety of Supreme Court justices. And I'm not going to say this protester or that protester ought to be arrested. I just think that that's a judgment call to be made by law enforcement, not by a senator on a Sunday show.
Understood, but they haven't been arrested yet, and nobody has, for protesting outside these judges' homes that were published online, only the conservative justices. What I want to also ask you is, the president hasn't said anything publicly about this specific threat about Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. The White House press secretary said a couple of things in a gaggle to reporters that the president condemns violence of any kind. But should the president have said something publicly about this?
Brett, the president has repeatedly spoken out against politically motivated violence in our country, the risk of politically motivated violence in our country. And as you well know, presidents often speak more through their press secretaries to events of the day. I certainly have denounced this latest threat against Justice Kavanaugh, but it's important that we remember there are threats of political violence of many kinds and types. Folks who are watching this morning who didn't watch the January 6th hearing should take a few moments and review what Congresswoman Liz Cheney, an unimpeachably conservative Republican from Wyoming, had to say in her opening statement. I think there are risks of political violence we should all be speaking out against and acting to ensure we control, manage, and reduce.
We're going to talk about January 6th in just a moment, but don't you think Democrats and the media would possibly, Senator, be making more about a threat like this, a specific threat, if it was happening to liberal justices?
Well, Brett, you have in front of you the Democratic senator who co-sponsored with Senator Cornyn a bill that would provide greater security
I'm just
for
saying
the
publicly,
families
Senator.
of justices. I don't know how more publicly I can say that I think threats of violence against Supreme Court justices, their families, their clerks are reprehensible, unacceptable, and we should take action to secure the federal judiciary.
All right, last thing before we get to January 6th. A lot has been made this week about words, how much they matter, how much stirring the pot, giving the green light to violence in any way, shape, or form is unacceptable. Take a listen to this.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
On the steps of the Supreme Court, did those words qualify, Senator?
So here's a key distinction. What Senator Schumer was saying was that he was upset, he was alarmed, he was concerned at the prospect that justices would reverse decades of a well-established fundamental constitutional right in our country. What he did not say was, let's go attack them. The point of the January 6th hearing is to prove that that is, in fact, what President Trump did, that he, in the words of Congresswoman Cheney, summoned the mob, stirred up the mob, and then lit the fuse that sent them storming the Capitol of the United States. I do think there's a distinguishable difference between what we just heard from Senator Schumer and the actions taken by former President Trump and his circle of advisors in the days before January 6th.
Okay,
and the results were clear and I think catastrophic. The physical assault of officers that led to several officer deaths and the shattering of the Capitol perimeter. Frankly, as one of the members of the Senate who had to be escorted out along with the vice president by Capitol Police just feet ahead of an angry mob, I do think that we are at risk of a season of political violence in this country, and all of us should reduce the temper and level of our rhetoric.
Including Senator Schumer, who has said justices release the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You don't see any problem with that kind of language on the Supreme Court?
That's not what I said. What I just said, Brett, was I think all of us need to reduce the level of our rhetoric and be mindful of the fact that stirring up potential violence is not a good or constructive thing to be doing at this moment in our country by any political leader.
You mentioned the primetime hearings, and you've made the case about January 6th and the importance. The committee obviously had this presentation. The New York Times said that they praised it for its sober approach. There will be many committee hearings to come. But this is also the New York Times. It is clear that the hearings coming 5 months before midterm elections, in which Democrats are bracing for big losses, carry high political stakes. Are there concerns of politicization here in your mind, Senator?
Look, I think what impressed me about those January 6 hearings, about the first hearing that I watched, was how clear and nonpartisan and thoughtful and directed it was. I certainly don't think that Congresswoman Cheney or Congressman Kinzinger were trying to impact the midterm election chances of Democrats. I think the point here has been to take a hard and clear-eyed look at what happened on January 6th and new evidence that they've uncovered about the role of the former president's close advisors in how they shaped the events that led to that really critical moment in our modern American history. We've never had our Capitol stormed by Americans. We've never had an attempt through an insurrection, through a riot, to try and interrupt the peaceful transfer of power. And Bret, right now I'm working with a bipartisan group of senators to try to make reforms to the Electoral Count Act to make it clear that Vice President Pence did the right thing on the night of January 6th, that no vice president has the power, nor should they, to unilaterally overturn the will of the American people.
Speaking of the New York Times, the paper also had a detailed piece this weekend entitled, "Should Biden Run in 2024? Democratic Whispers of No Start to Rise," in which the paper states they have interviews of dozens of Democratic officials and members of Congress who backed Biden in 2020, quote, "reveal a party alarmed about Republicans' rising strength and the extraordinarily pessimistic about an immediate path forward." One DNC committee member is actually quoted as saying Mr. Biden should announce his intent not to seek re-election in 24 right after the midterms. You're a close ally. Is President Biden running in 24, and should he?
Yes, he is, and I'll tell you, Bret, it is my understanding. Let me be clear. I'm not speaking on his behalf or announcing a candidacy. I'm just saying that as of now, it's my understanding that the president intends to seek a second term, and I understand why. His leadership on the world stage has been impressive. He's just returned from a successful Summit of the Americas. He's pulled together 4 critical partners in the Indo-Pacific in a new organization called the Quad, a new partnership with allies. And in the face of Russia's brutal invasion, their aggression against Ukraine, President Biden has shown a masterful skill at pulling together the EU and NATO in order to push back, in order to support Ukraine's brave resistance to Russian aggression here at home. His predecessor talked about infrastructure over and over, was never able to get a bill on infrastructure to the floor and to his desk. President Biden signed into law one of the biggest investments in infrastructure in American history. And President Biden and Democrats in the Senate have a plan for how to reduce prescription drug prices, how to tackle health care costs, that I remain optimistic we will get done. The deficit's coming down. He's got clear plans for how to tackle inflation, and he's helping lead the United States to a position of strength on the world stage. I can understand why he might think running for re-election is a good idea.
Okay. Last thing, obviously the deficit numbers, Republicans point out, they went way up, and COVID, and it took a dip because of that. But the other thing is Saudi Arabia. It's being reported now that the president is going to visit Saudi Arabia. How, Senator, can that not look like a blatant effort to just try to get gas prices down?
Well, the president is going to the GCC. This is a summit that's being hosted by the Saudi Kingdom that will allow him a chance at one time in one place to meet with a whole range of heads of state from the Persian Gulf, from the Middle East. The president, as you know, has decades of experience in foreign policy, and I trust his firm hand, his leadership in this moment. We do need to improve the supply of oil and gas to our Western European partners in order to help sustain their support for Ukraine's fierce resistance against Russia's invasion. And I do expect that the president will be addressing both the human rights record of the leadership of Saudi Arabia and our shared security concerns, our concerns about Iran, our concerns about the war in Yemen, our concerns about oil and gas supply. But I think this is another moment where the president may well make significant steps forward in terms of supporting the security of our vital partner Israel in the region and of addressing the real threat to security posed by Iran and Iran's nuclear program. So I'm optimistic that this will be another productive step forward on the world stage by one of America's most seasoned foreign policy leaders, President Biden.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Always nice to speak with you.
Thank you, Bret.
Up next, we'll